tract or gastrointestinal tract. Gastrointestinal tract. Also called the alimentary canal. It literally is a tube going lips to the anus. And all the associated structures. So that's the approach you take when you learn it. You learn it in sequence. So one of the first models you're going to look at is you're going to look at the sagittal head section. And I didn't have you get that out, but I'm just going to kind of sketch it here. Sagittal. All right, 1G, 2Gs. That's right. Sagittal head. So our sagittal head looks a little bit like this, right? I got a nose, and some lips, a chin, something along those lines. Up here we got a brain. There we got a cerebellum. Here we have a brainstem. And down to the spinal cord. Okay. Well, this is what we want to focus on right here. Got a big old muscle in there. That's the tongue. Put a T on there for tongue. And then here we have a bony structure that separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity. Let's put this nasal cavity up here. So when you look at the sagittal head section, there's a few things I want you to pay attention to. You've got the lips out here. Okay? And in there's a little connective tissue band called the frenulum that connects the lips to the gums. Okay? We don't really have a good model to show you the frenulum because our sagittal section is a mid-sagittal section, so it's cut right on the midline, so you really don't see that. But that's what the frenulum is. This area between the teeth, there are teeth. Between the teeth and the gums is called the vestibule. Between the teeth and the gums, that's called the vestibule. You go back behind the teeth and you're into the oral cavity proper.
Is that the deep pocket?
The vestibule?
Vestibule.
That's if you were going to put a piece of gum in there or some chaw or something like that, that would be in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Between the lips and the teeth.
And the oral cavity proper is?
Behind the teeth. So the oral cavity is from the teeth all the way back here to the opening of the esophagus. That's all oral cavity. Approximately 2/3 of the oral cavity is occupied with something. What's sitting in there?
Tongue.
The tongue. Yeah, the tongue takes up most of the oral cavity. This whole area here is the oral cavity. You don't have to learn the different types of teeth, okay? If you're going to go into dental hygiene or something like that, you'll spend a ridiculous amount of time talking about the teeth. I suppose at this point you should probably know you have 32 of them, okay? That's about it. You go back behind that, and like I said, you find the tongue. The tongue fills up most of the oral cavity. You go back behind the tongue, and we get into a structure called the pharynx. I'm going to highlight this in blue. Everything I put in blue in there is called the pharynx. The pharynx has 3 parts. Naso, oro, and laryngo. Each one of those go with the word pharynx. Nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx. Okay? The only part of the pharynx that's part of the digestive system is here. And that is the oropharynx. The oropharynx is bounded by the uvula, a above, and the epiglottis below. So above, uvula, epiglottis below. It's between the two. You look in the sagittal head section here, and you should be able to see a division line between the oral cavity and the nasal cavity, and that is a bony plate. That bony plate right there is part of the maxilla. Part of the maxilla and part of the palatine bone. So that's stuff we learned in A&P 1, and I'm not going to go back and hold you responsible for that. But the first part here is the maxilla, the back part is the palatine bone. That bony plate is called the hard palate. The roof of your mouth is the hard palate. You go back behind the hard palate, it becomes soft. In this area here, it becomes soft. And that is called the soft palate. It's connective tissue and muscle. And the end of the soft palate is your uvula. If you go, and stick out your tongue, you see that dangly thing there, that's the uvula. The uvula's job, other than just to be funky and hang in there, is that when you swallow, the constrictor muscles of the pharynx raise it up against the opening to the nasal cavity so food does not go up into the nose. Okay? It's a valve. It shuts off the opening to the nasopharynx, so when you swallow or cough or stuff like that, the material doesn't go up into the nasopharynx. That's the job of the uvula. All right. So for now, it's a landmark you're going to find the superior part of the oropharynx. Now you go behind the base of the tongue, and you're going to find a few things down there. I'm going to erase my bracket for the oropharynx because it's going to be over what I need to show you here. Let's take that out for a second. At the base of the tongue, there's a flap of tissue. There's a flap of cartilage that covers a second tube. And the second tube is not part of the digestive system either. Here in the front, we've got another tube, and this is the trachea. Your windpipe. Well, the trachea comes up here, and it opens up just anterior to the esophagus, and it has a flap of tissue kind of right here. It's called the epiglottis. And you're going to be able to clearly see that on the sagittal head section also. The epiglottis functions a little bit like the uvula in that when you swallow, the epiglottis tips backwards, covers the opening of the trachea, which is called the glottis, the opening, so that food can slide over the epiglottis into the esophagus. Back here in the back, this is the esophagus. And what does the esophagus connect to down in the end? Right, it comes down into the stomach. So, are we agreed that for the food to get from the oral cavity to the esophagus, it's got to go over the trachea? Got to pass over the trachea. Well, that's no good. If you get food going down to the trachea, we call that aspiration. Right? You aspirated something, and it's, if you had a soda or something like that, and it goes down there, and you have a coughing fit. We call it going down the wrong pipe. Right? We've said that before. That's when the epiglottis fails to close properly, and then something comes down into the trachea and makes you have coughing fits. Usually it happens because either you hiccuped or coughed or tried to talk while eating, and then something. Those two purposes can't work at the same time because the epiglottis has got to be open to speak. You have to push air out of your lungs over your vocal cords, which are in here, to speak, and yet it's got to be closed to eat. So you can't do those two processes at the same time. So all of this is simply so you can recognize the boundaries of the oropharynx. Okay. Uvula, epiglottis. Got it? Okay, so that's our oropharynx. Above the uvula is the nasopharynx, and I'm not really going to talk anything about that until we get to the respiratory section. And then the pouch behind the epiglottis here, this area, is called the laryngopharynx. And the laryngopharynx is just a pouch at the top of the esophagus. So hopefully you can pick those three out on the model. And I think there's a real good diagram either in your textbook or your lab book where it kind of colors them and highlights them. And I'll show that to you in lecture today. Okay, so now we're into the esophagus. Well, along with the lymphatic system that we talked about last time, there were three structures up here in the sagittal head section I wanted to be aware of in the lymphatic system. Remember what those were? The tonsils. Okay. So back here in the nasopharynx, all right, those are the pharyngeal tonsils. Off to the lateral sides on either side of the tongue, palatine tonsils, and then actually at the base of the tongue, under there, lingual tonsil. So you've got two palatine, one adenoid, or one pharyngeal, and one lingual tonsil. And those you can see on the sagittal head section. Okay. From here, guys, I'm not sure how much diagramming I really got to do. You got the models in front of you. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go ahead and take the heart out, take the pectoralis muscle, take the lungs out, take all of that stuff out until you get down to the point where you can find the esophagus. Okay? The esophagus is kind of a pale yellow tube that should be underneath all that stuff. Okay. Now, leave the liver in for right now. Just take the chest stuff out. Okay? Right. So everybody point to the esophagus so I can see that you know where the esophagus is. Okay. Yeah, you were right the first time. Okay. Yeah. Trace your finger up and down on the esophagus so I know what you're pointing to. That's not the white stuff, it's the tube behind it. Here's the esophagus. 28. It's 28 on the model. Okay. Everybody find it? Now you can't see that because it disappears up behind the trachea as it goes up into the neck. But that goes all the way up to the oral cavity. That's the tube that connects the oral cavity to the stomach. Now you notice that the esophagus does something interesting. That curved white layer that sits right on top of the liver, what's that? Anybody know what that is? Right, that's the diaphragm. Okay. If you're going to go from the thorax to the abdomen, you got to go through the diaphragm. So that's not ideal, but you have to. So go ahead and pull that liver out of there now. Okay. The liver is a big triangular red thing with a little green thing stuck under its inferior board. Okay, pull that out. Now, try to find the area where the esophagus goes down through the diaphragm. See if you can see where the esophagus pokes through the diaphragms. That hole in the diaphragm that the esophagus passes through is called, what is it called? It's called hiatus. Esophageal hiatus. Okay, it's called the esophageal hiatus. That's the hole in the diaphragm the esophagus passes through. Everybody identify that? Right, there you go. Okay. What does the esophagus plug into immediately next? Stomach. The stomach. Okay. So, take a look at that stomach. The stomach is a sac, right? And if you're looking at it the right way, the right side of the stomach has a pouch that goes off towards the right. It's a bump on the right side. Kind of a bump that sticks up on the side. I had another one I can hold. My hand won't put it. So, this is how the stomach should sit in here, right about there. Okay? This is the bump I'm talking about over here on the side. That bump is something called the fundus. Fundus means bump. Okay? This is the fundus. I keep saying right. Anybody correct me? That's the left. Okay, that's the left. The bump is on the left. Okay.
What was the hiatus word?
The hiatus, the esophageal hiatus, is the hole.
Esophageal hiatus. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Okay. That's the hole that the esophagus passes through. Okay, so the bump goes off to the left. Sorry, just like a moment. Now, the stomach tapers and gets thinner as it goes to the right. Okay. Kind of goes inferiorly and curves off to the right. Those two sides of it are called curvatures. Okay. So the more superior curvature is called the lesser curvature, the one that goes on kind of like the inner radius. And the one on the outside, right, that's called the greater curvature. Yeah, so that's the lesser curvature. And that's the greater curvature down there. Everybody following? Okay.